weekend, the New York Times published a lengthy piece about conservative operatives who are looking to find opposition research on journalists who publish negative stories about Donald Trump. And the reason why they're doing this is to discredit them and also intimidate them to prevent future negative stories on Trump. Now, I think Trump does a pretty decent job putting himself out there in a negative light as it is, but let me give you the details on what the Times found. Operatives have closely examined more than a decade's worth of public posts and statements by journalists. Only a fraction of what the network claims to have uncovered has been made public, with more to be disclosed as the 2020 election heats up. Now, they targeted 2 individuals already, one of whom's already been fired. It was a 25-year-old photojournalist at CNN who had put out some questionable tweets when he was about 15, 16 years old. So good job, way to get him. The photojournalist, by the way, didn't publish any negative stories on Donald Trump. In fact, this loose network of conservatives are targeting anyone who works at any news organization that has ever published anything negative on Donald Trump. The research is said to extend to members of journalists' families who are active in politics, as well as liberal activists and other political opponents of the president. And it's targeting not only high-profile journalists who challenge the administration, but also anyone who works for any news organization that members of the network see as hostile to Trump, no matter how tangential the job may be to the coverage of his presidency, and it is being used explicitly as retribution for coverage. So there are more details, but this is purposely done to intimidate journalists from doing their jobs, period.
Yeah, so first of all, the stories are negative because they quote Donald Trump. And so it's not like it's op-eds attacking Donald Trump. Although I'm sure that some of those organizations certainly have had that. But no, they're like, don't quote Donald Trump because otherwise people realize he's an idiot. So any story that they perceive to be negative about Trump is usually just giving you whatever Trump said or did, which is borders on insanity and oftentimes crosses that border. So, and this isn't, they always paint this as unusual, and I get it. For a president, it's unusual, but actually the right wing has been doing this for a long time. Roger Ailes did it at Fox News. He had a binder on executives and hosts on other channels that were competitive with Fox News. When I was a host on MSNBC, the PR department told me about that and said, be careful, because I had done an article attacking Fox News. And they said, you shouldn't do that. I said, we're at MSNBC, we're competing with Fox News. They're like, they'll have a folder on you and attack you personally. So the Republicans have been the bad guys on this forever. Ironically, it's the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN that won't tell you that. They'll say, well, both sides do it. What both sides? Where's the left wing's folders and attacks against people's families? And so ironically, these are the organizations that do political correctness with false equivalencies, but it's never good enough for the right wing. They attack them anyway. The only upside to this story is that finally, since it has affected the powerful, they're paying attention. Because this has been happening online to folks who are the tip of the spear. So they've attacked the Young Turks, these same set of guys, the same right wing, the same tactics have attacked the Young Turks, Sam Cedar. I mean, you name a progressive host online, we've already gotten this 10 times over, 100 times over, because they know we influence people, and especially the younger generation, way more than anybody else does, so they attack us first. But when we're attacked, the rest of the establishment media is like, oh, well, I do declare. Yeah, perhaps not, right?
Yeah.
Both sides do it, false equivalency.
No, I mean, the establishment media will publish the same attacks. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah, without ever noting, hey, these are hatchet jobs. These are coming from a illegitimate source. And hey, maybe I should be careful about that James O'Keefe video. Maybe he might have edited it like he did 12 other times,
right,
etc. But now that it touches them, all of a sudden the New York Times is like, whoa, hey, what's going on, right? Yeah, I know, this is the same thing we've been telling you for at least 5 years.
Well, okay, so there are 2 things I want to point out. First off, the right wing is unfortunately a well-oiled machine, starting with the executive branch and the Trump administration, going down the pipeline to the most questionable publications, including Breitbart. So one of the examples that the Times noted was when there was a piece published on Stephanie Grisham, right? So she is in the communications team for Donald Trump. She's worked for Melania Trump for a long time. Apparently, the Times put out an article that did not shine a positive light on her work history. And so the central player in this loose collective of conservatives is a man by the name of Arthur Schwartz, and he is Don Jr.'s good friend. And so he spends all his time digging up all this Oppo research, including social media posts dating back a decade ago, and then he'll feed it. He'll tweet it, of course, and then he'll feed it to publications like Breitbart. The New York Times published a profile on White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, which included unflattering details about her employment history. Then, in retaliation, Breitbart News published an article that documented anti-Semitic and racist tweets written a decade ago by Tom Wright Piersanti, who was in college at the time and has since become an editor at the Times political desk, right? So then that story by Breitbart gets retweeted by members of Trump's administration and his friends, and then it starts building momentum. And then what does the Times do? They freak out and they start investigating. They haven't fired him yet, but were his tweets or his social media posts put in context? Are you automatically gonna concede to the right wing and the hatchet job that they're doing? Like, my point is, they have a well-oiled machine, they have a strategy, and it's important for media to not fall for their games, right? Not fall for their pressure, and they do time and time again. CNN fired a 25-year-old photojournalist over a story that he didn't even publish himself. It's disgusting.
Well, they're talking about his tweets when he was 15 years old. So let me get this right. Republicans say if you attempted rape in high school, as Kavanaugh was charged with, it's totally irrelevant. But if you tweeted the wrong thing in high school, you should be fired immediately. Really? That's your standard? You don't believe that. You're just playing games. And you're playing, I get it, you're playing political games, at least we understand it. But the New York Times is like genuinely shocked and chagrined, like, oh, turns out there might be some bad actors on that side. Well, Sherlock, I'm glad you finally figured it out. I'm glad you guys are journalists. But I think they're genuinely like, oh my God, bad actors. No, everybody has good intent and both sides do it. Anyway, look, when you look at the things that the other guy that they targeted went after, he said, look, I was joking around with my friends and I don't know what the racial and religious composition of his friends are, and he probably doesn't want to get them in trouble, and etc. But you got to look at that context. You can't just be like, some wrong word was said. If he actually meant it, that's a different story. And how old was he? Was he a journalist at the time? Those are all relevant. But if you look back and go, hey, he might have said something in joking to a Jewish friend that sounded anti-Semitic, removed from that context, and then you fire him over that because the right wing wants you to, well, then you're an idiot, okay? And you're weak, and those fascists will steamroll you while you're playing patty cakes. It looks like, look, don't get me wrong, this is a positive development because it looks like for the first time the mainstream media is going, oh, this is kind of unfair. I see what they're doing. To which, of course, I reply, of course. They've just been doing it. They've been doing it to everybody but you until now. So now that it touches you, you're like, okay, oh wow, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. Of course you should. And last thing on this, guys, look, there's different levels of terrorism that the right wing does. Whenever there's something they don't agree with, they issue death threats nonstop. I don't mean Schwartz or Trump, etc. Although Trump threatens violence, encourages violence regularly. No, they just release it to the crazy people that follow them. And it's called stochastic terrorism. And so part of that is they target your family. And it might not be death threats, it might be different tricks. I don't want to get into all the tricks, okay, but we've seen them all. They target where you work. They target you personally. Then they target you physically. And then they send the death threats. And so you have no idea the pressure that builds. So random people working at those organizations, maybe you're an accountant at the New York Times. And now you realize, and this has been happening for a long time. Wait, am I gonna keep working at the New York Times when they're threatening everybody in the building? And they have a great number of madmen on their side that actually have sent pipe bombs, that actually have done mass shootings, etc. And they keep encouraging them. And you know what it does? After a while, it works, and it gets the accountant to be nervous, and leave the New York Times. And then more, and then more, and then the terrorists win. And so this is how the right wing is trying to terrorize us all. And it's a tough situation to be put in. The correct response is for all of us to stand up together and end the false equivalencies and end the out of context character assassinations and say, we're not gonna listen to you. I don't care what you found from a 15-year-old and what he said a decade ago or 2 decades ago. You're a hatchet man and you're a joke, and we're gonna do real news. But that requires courage. So they've got to have the courage to stand up and say, yes, one side definitely does it more, and we're gonna stop feeding the trolls, and we're gonna end this nonsense. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.